High school students Emma and Dean go on a school trip to Trinidad. However, they get separated from the group and become stranded on a remote island. With no one else around, they must work together for a better chance of surviving as their feelings get in the way. One morning, Emma, an organized and responsible student, starts her day early and prepares for school. Meanwhile, Dean, an introverted and troublesome teenager, gets up from bed, heads to the restroom, then plays video games as his father, Jack, reminds him not to be late. Upon arriving at school, Emma and her younger sister Stacy prepare to leave the car when their mother, Barbara, drops them off. Afterward, Emma meets her best friend Lizzie in the hallway. While talking, a famous quarterback player, Stephen Sullivan, greets Emma in class. Mr. Christensen, their teacher, announces that the bus will leave at 7 in the morning. The next day, they are all set for their trip to Trinidad Sanctuary. During lunch, Lizzie shares with her friends what happened between Emma and Stephen earlier that morning. She insists the two should become close during their one-week stay in Trinidad. While discussing the carnival in Trinidad for their trip, Emma catches a glimpse of Dean cutting an apple with his knife, which annoys Lizzie. Their friend Helen claims she used to be schoolmates with Dean and adds that he's a good person, even if Lizzie disapproves. Jude, on the other hand, agrees with Helen. Shortly after, Miss Collier, a teacher, arrives and takes Dean's knife. While Dean remains unbothered, she brings him to the principal's office for violating the school rules. The following morning, Emma finishes packing her clothes for the trip and thanks her mother and father, Phil, for allowing her to go. Meanwhile, Jack reminds Dean of his efforts to get his son a place on the trip despite his recent trouble at school. The young man begs to differ, but eventually, he decides to go. At school, Christensen calls out for everyone to board the bus. Barbara advises Emma to be safe as Dean hears the exact words from his father. While boarding, Stephen asks Emma how she's doing when he leaves. Lizzie teases her, but Emma doesn't show any interest. Hours later, the students arrive in Trinidad. Collier announces they can enjoy themselves for a few hours and meet at dinner as their program will formally start the next day. Shortly after, Emma and her friends go to the pool. While having a great time, Emma comes across Stephen. She notices Dean looking at her from afar on a balcony. The following day, the students start their project to help build a school for the less fortunate children of Trinidad. That evening, Jude enthusiastically announces to her friends that Stephen invited them to a carnival party on a local boat. The responsible student has second thoughts, but her friends demand she goes with them, convincing her. Later, the girls arrive at the party and excitedly board the boat. After a while, Emma looks for Helen during the party, but unexpectedly finds Stephen kissing someone else. Upset, she ignores it and walks away. As Emma passes by Dean, he asks her if she and Stephen are together. Annoyed, Emma answers that it's none of his business. Moments after the police arrive, announcing everyone to move to the front of the boat, Emma accidentally falls into the water, but no one notices her except for Dean. Upon hearing Emma's call for help, Dean immediately jumps into the water and they swim toward a dinghy nearby. Dean cuts the dinghy rope connecting to the boat because he doesn't want to get in more trouble. Emma wants to return to the boat, but he insists they will be fine and follow the ship. Later, however, an enormous storm is coming their way. Dean and Emma struggle to follow the boat as they discover that the dinghy doesn't have any motor. The following day at the hotel, the trip is now canceled due to last night's party. Lizzie tells Collier that Emma didn't go home the previous night and thought she was with someone else. The teacher clarifies whether this is true, and Lizzie asserts that Emma isn't the type of person to bail. She adds that her best friend was last seen on the boat that night. Meanwhile, on the dinghy, Emma and Dean drifted into the Caribbean Sea. Dean checks his phone, but unfortunately, it got wet. He suggests that Emma use hers instead, but she can't find any reception at the hotel. Christensen conducts an attendance check and doesn't find Dean. In the middle of the sea, Emma tells Dean how they should have just followed the boat. Then she spots an island in the midst of the conversation, so Dean paddles toward it. At the hotel, Christensen and the police interrogate Emma's friends. Collier asks if there's any way to find the two students, but the police say it's more likely for them to find their way back. Lizzie worries because Emma isn't an adventurous person at all. Paddling their hearts out, Dean and Emma finally make it to the island. Emma checks her phone for reception but still gets nothing. Then Dean finds a flare gun on the dinghy and keeps it at the ready. Jack receives the news about his son's disappearance. Immediately, he goes to the school and meets Barbara. At the same time, Phil hurriedly enters the campus. Worried, the parents discuss the issue with the principal but end up disappointed with what he can offer. Meanwhile, Emma and Dean explore the island to find shelter deeper into the woods. They come across a blue lagoon. Then Dean finds a cave and borrows Emma's phone for a flashlight. As they investigate it, numerous bats come out of the place. The two run away and get soaked in the nearby lagoon. Right after, they return to shore, but their dinghy is now gone, leaving only one life jacket ashore. Persistent in going home, they circle the island to recover the dinghy, but fail. The sun is setting as Dean and Emma take a rest. Meanwhile, at the airport, their parents patiently wait for their flight to Trinidad to find their children. At night, the two teenagers camp on the beach side. Suddenly, Emma hears a twig snapping, and Dean reassures her that they'll be fine. Hopeful of finding reception, Emma checks her phone but finds none. Her companion notices that she is feeling cold, so he offers the young woman a shirt. Morning comes, and Dean finds Emma at the shore, writing SOS on the sand. He asks where her phone is, but discovers that the battery is dead. Then Dean goes for a swim as Emma can't help but look at him. At the hotel, Christensen discusses with the missing teenager's parents that the police are now searching and have found a missing dinghy on the boat at the island. Emma fetches some water from a nearby river and hears strange noises. Uncomfortable with her surroundings, she decides to leave for her safety. She then goes back to putting SOS on the sand as Dean finds himself frequently looking at her. The two continue to feed themselves with anything they can find on the island. Eventually, they create a makeshift hut. Tired from the day, Emma finds Dean sleeping. She joins the young man as he faces her and puts his hand on her waist. She finds this comforting, so she leaves it be. The following day, while Emma showers at the lagoon, Dean asks for sunscreen. She tells him to look in her bags, but he informs her that he can't find any. Anxious, Emma mentions that something else is on the island. With the search now officially called off, Jack uses a helicopter to search the next day, and Barbara joins him. Back at the island, Emma tells her companion about how much she misses her family. While she tries to light a fire, Dean suddenly finds a skull nearby. In shock at what they're seeing, Emma cries about their situation and feels hopeless. Dean reassures her that they will get home if they stay together. Reassured, he proceeds to kiss Emma passionately. Night falls and the two spend an intimate time. Strangely, Emma cries and mentions how much she misses home. The sun rises and Emma wakes up alone. She calls out for Dean, but doesn't find him around. Concerned, she makes her way into the forest to search for him. Fortunately, she finds him making a proper burial of the remains of the person they found the other day. In a state of confusion, Emma asks Dean what is going on. He tells her that he doesn't need anything from her. Disappointed, she tries to convince him to open up to her. However, she accidentally falls and injures her knee, which Dean immediately treats. Emma recalls their situation, and Dean reassures her that they will be alright. Rain falls, and Dean finds joy in it. Emma feels as happy as he is, and they dance in the rain for some time. Nearly a month later, the news officially calls off the search for Dean and Emma. In front of the school, Emma's friends witness the news reporter, believing that their friend is still out there. Similarly, Barbara is persistent in finding her daughter and goes back on a helicopter with Jack. With utmost sadness, the mother returns home without any leads on her missing daughter. At the shore, Dean tells Emma of a green flash that his mother used to mention, which appears right on the horizon line just as the sun comes down, and how he has never seen it. Weeks pass as the teenagers enjoy the nature surrounding them at sea. They dive and have a great time with so much affection. The two continue spending passionate moments together. In the middle of the forest, Emma sleeps. An approaching aircraft makes a nearby sound, waking her up. Dean notices as well, and he rushes to the shore to get the flare, but doesn't find it. Emma catches up to him, but the plane is too far to hear them shouting in disbelief. Emma checks their hut for the flare, but doesn't find it. She believes that someone else is on the island stealing their belongings. Days pass, and the two still haven't been rescued. In their hut, they discuss how they should go deeper into the forest to survive. Suddenly, a growling sound interrupts their conversation. Dean heads to the forest and searches for the creature. Emma worries for him, so she follows him into the woods. Dean turns to his left and finds a black panther. He runs away from the animal as fast as he can, but he falls to the ground shortly after. Emma arrives where Dean is holding a knife covered in blood, with the Black Panther lifeless. Throughout the many weeks, life continues for everyone with the teenager still missing. Eventually, the teenagers learn to survive, hunt, and build a more robust shelter in the middle of the forest. Surviving together for a while now, Emma and Dean fall deeper in love while chatting. Emma's lost things fall from above, and when they look up, a monkey is throwing their missing stuff at them. Eventually, they see the flare gun and manage to retrieve it. In desperation, Emma fires the flare gun, which angers Dean because he wants to stay. The two argue, and the responsible student walks away from him. Moments later, when Dean is hunting for fish, Emma apologizes to him and they reconcile. Unexpectedly, a helicopter passes by, spotting the teenagers on the shore. The two are rescued and finally return. As the news rapidly spreads at the airport, the friends and family of the survivors are glad to see them. They welcome the young survivors with warm hugs and smiles. However, the young adults are not as overjoyed as everyone else. Later on, Dean pays a visit to Emma at her home. They talk about how weird it is to finally be back home. Dean leans towards her to kiss her, but she avoids it. Instead, she invites him to their homecoming party the next day. The following morning, Emma's parents give a warm speech to the rescued students. At the party, things return to normal, and Emma and Dean are finally back in school. Emma's popularity grows while Dean still remains lonely. Whenever they come across each other, all they can do is share glances and nothing more. Days later, the young woman tries calling Dean, but he ignores it. In Emma's room, Stacy tells her older sister how she felt seen and recognized while she was away, but later realized that she misses her sister after after all. The older sister shares how amazing Stacy is, and they decide to go to prom together, strengthening their sisterly bond. The next morning, Dayan visits his mother's grave and proudly says he finally saw the green flash. Back at the island on prom night, Dayan watches TV at home until his father interrupts, asking if his son wants to borrow a tuxedo. At the party, Lizzie approaches Emma and walks her to a surprise. Appearing in front of them is Dean, wearing a tuxedo under the rain. Upon seeing him, Emma goes out of the party and kisses Dean passionately. The two happily reunite with each other, dancing under the pouring rain. Here's a question for you. Now that Emma and Dean have survived their adventure on the island, if you were stranded on a deserted island, which 3 items would you want to have with you and why? Share your creative and hilarious answers in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more interesting tales with a little spice.